story. She said she hadn't loved me in years. I always believed that love was something you had to fight for, something that required patience, sacrifice, and an almost stubborn kind of hope. For 10 years, a full decade of my life, I held onto that belief like it was the only truth worth keeping. I built my marriage on it, brick by brick, year after year. My wife, Claire, was the kind of woman who could fill a room just by walking into it. Dark amber eyes that caught the light in a way that still caught me off guard, even after all those years together. A soft, almost reluctant smile. A voice that used to feel like coming home after a long trip. I structured my entire existence around her. Around us. Around the idea of what I believed we were. I was wrong. About all of it. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when the first crack split the foundation clean through. I had driven back from a job site in Riverside. Long shift, a lot of noise, not enough coffee, and pulled into our driveway in Pasadena around 7:30. The porch light was on. The living room curtains were drawn. I could see the warm glow of the candles Claire always kept lit in the evenings, that vanilla and cedar scent drifting out even before I opened the front door. Everything looked exactly like it always did. Exactly like home. But the moment I stepped inside and kicked off my boots, I heard her voice from the den. Low, conversational. The kind of tone you use when you think no one else is listening. At first I thought she was on a call with her sister in Phoenix, laughing about something light and harmless. And then I heard my own name cut through the air, like something sharp. Nathan just doesn't get it. I can't stand being around him anymore. I stopped breathing. My hand was still on the door handle. I did not move. Every single thing he does irritates me, she continued, her voice dropping even lower, like she was confessing something she had been holding back for a very long time. He's so predictable, so painfully boring. It's like living inside a routine that someone else designed for me. I feel like I'm suffocating in that house. That house. Our house. The one we picked out together. The one we repainted 3 times because she couldn't decide between sage green and warm white. The one I spent 6 weekends building a garden bed in the backyard for. Because she'd mentioned once, offhandedly, that she always wanted to grow tomatoes. I stood in that hallway with my jacket half off and the blood draining from my face. My ears were ringing. I wanted to convince myself I had misheard. That it was sarcasm. Some inside joke I was taking out of context. But the weight in her voice, that settled, exhausted weight, was not the sound of someone joking. It was the sound of someone finally saying out loud what they had been thinking for a very long time. And then she said the words that ended everything. I haven't loved him in years. I don't know how to leave. He's stable. He's reliable. He doesn't do anything wrong. But I don't want reliable anymore. I don't want safe. I want to feel something again. The silence after those words was enormous. I stood there inside it, completely hollowed out. My chest had gone tight and then strangely, terrifyingly empty. The way a room feels after all the furniture has been cleared out of it. I couldn't identify what I was feeling, because there were too many things at once, crashing into each other. Humiliation, grief, cold creeping rage. And underneath all of it, something worse. Recognition. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, in the part one had refused to listen to for years, I had sensed it in the silences between us. In the way her hand stopped reaching for mine. In the way she looked past me when I talked about my day. I had seen the signs, and I had chosen, deliberately and desperately, not to see them at all. I don't know how long I stayed frozen in that hallway. Long enough for the feeling to shift from shock into something much colder, much calmer. I turned around, walked quietly to our bedroom, pulled a duffel bag from the top shelf of the closet, the one I used for work trips up to Sacramento, and started filling it. Clothes for 4 or 5 days. My phone charger. My wallet. My keys. My hands were completely steady, which surprised me. I think my body understood before my mind did that there was nothing left to argue about. On my way out, I passed the framed photo on the dresser. Our wedding, Santa Barbara, 8 years ago. Claire was radiant, her arms thrown around my neck, laughing at something I had said just before the photographer clicked the shutter. She had looked so genuinely happy in that moment. Or at least, I had always believed she had. Standing there with my bag over my shoulder, I no longer knew what to believe. I walked back down the hall. She was on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, legs curled underneath her. The moment she saw me standing in the doorway, bag in hand, jacket on, the smile fell off her face so fast. It was almost violent. I let the silence stretch for a moment. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of it. Then I said the only thing that felt honest. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Claire." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I turned around, walked through the front door, and I did not look back. The night air hit me like cold water. I crossed the driveway, threw the bag into the back seat, and sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. My hands were on the steering wheel. My knuckles were pale. I was trying to locate my next breath. I found it eventually, ragged, shaking, not particularly useful, and then I turned the key and pulled out onto the street. I had no destination. That was the strange part. 10 years of my life had been organized entirely around another person's needs, her preferences, her schedule, her comfort, and now that the structure had collapsed, I had absolutely no idea where to point the car. Our mutual friends would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. My parents were up in Portland. A hotel felt like surrender, like making it officially, physically real, in a way I wasn't ready for. So without thinking, I just drove. I took the 110 down toward the harbor and kept going. The freeway was dark and relatively empty, streetlights pulling long orange streaks across the asphalt. My mind kept replaying the audio loop of her voice, that flat, exhausted certainty, and I kept trying to remember the last time she had looked at me, with something that resembled warmth. I kept scanning back through memory, looking for the cracks I had been too blind to see. The way she had slowly stopped reaching for my hand. The way she sighed when I talked about my day. The way she had started spending more time on her phone, smiling at messages I was never part of. It hadn't been one clean break. It had been gradual, a slow withdrawal, 100 small distances stacked on top of each other, until the space between us was too wide to cross. I ended up at the waterfront near San Pedro, an empty parking lot overlooking the channel. I cut the engine and sat there in the dark, watching the water move, steady and indifferent, the kind of calm that has nothing to do with peace, and everything to do with the fact that the ocean simply doesn't care. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let myself feel it, all of it, without trying to manage it or reason my way out of it. The betrayal, the grief, the deep, humiliating ache of having loved someone completely, who had been counting the days until she could stop pretending. My phone lit up. Claire. I stared at the screen through 3 full rings. Then, against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was careful, controlled. She asked where I was. I didn't respond. She told me she didn't know what I thought I had heard. And I said, quietly, steadily, that I had heard everything, every word. There was a long silence. Then she tried again, told me she didn't mean it. Don't, I said, just that one word. And I hung up. I did not sleep that night. I watched the sky go from black to deep blue, to the particular gray that comes just before dawn. And I sat with the wreckage of 10 years, laid out in front of me like an inventory. 8 missed calls, 3 texts. The first 2 were panic and desperation. The third one made my stomach turn over. Said, "You're being dramatic. Can we please act like adults about this?" Dramatic. I had just learned that my wife had been emotionally absent from our marriage for years. had been waiting silently for some undefined exit, and I was the one being dramatic. She had reduced our entire marriage to something inconvenient, and now wanted to talk like it was a casual misunderstanding. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat and stared at the water until the sky turned gold. When I finally started the car again, I followed the coast for a while and eventually ended up at a small diner off the PCH, the kind of place with a flickering sign and vinyl booths, and a coffee machine that looked older than I was. The parking lot was half empty. I went inside, took a stool at the counter, and sat there without ordering anything. After a few minutes, a waitress appeared, middle-aged, tired eyes, the kind of face that had seen a lot, and set a mug of coffee in front of me, without being asked. I appreciated that. The last thing I wanted was to explain myself to a stranger when I barely understood what I was feeling myself. I sat there staring at the menu without reading it. The world around me felt distant, like I was watching it happen through a screen. The chatter of other customers, the clink of silverware, the hum of an old radio playing something I didn't recognize. All of it so ordinary, so completely unbothered by the fact that my world had shattered just hours ago. I had just ordered pancakes I didn't particularly want, when the door chimed behind me, and I heard footsteps cross the tile. And then a voice I recognized. Nathan. The back of my neck went cold. I turned slowly, already bracing myself, and there she was, Claire, standing near the entrance, arms crossed tightly over her jacket, hair slightly disheveled, like she had rushed out of the house. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes moved over me. The rumpled shirt, the stubble, the coffee cup, and then she took a hesitant step forward. She said she knew I always drove when I was upset, that she figured I would end up somewhere quiet. She came and sat across from me. She looked nervous. That was new. Claire was rarely nervous. Seeing her uncertain like this should have felt like an opening. Instead, it just made me tired. She told me she hadn't been trying to hurt me, that she had just been venting, that sometimes people say things they don't mean. I let her finish. Then I asked one question. How long, Claire? How long have you not loved me? She looked away. That was the answer. She didn't need to say a number. The way she broke eye contact told me everything I needed to know, about how long she had been carrying this, and choosing silence over honesty. I asked her then, if I hadn't overheard her that night, was she ever going to tell me? Her lips parted. She didn't answer, and there it was, the final, irreducible truth of the situation. She had been content to let me go on believing in something she had quietly discarded. She had accepted my effort, my affection, my devotion, and she had done it knowingly, with the full understanding that she was not giving me anything real in return. That wasn't a rough patch. That wasn't a communication problem. That was a choice she had made, over and over, every single day, for years. The waitress arrived and set a stack of pancakes in front of me. She glanced at Claire, then at me, and very professionally did not react to the atmosphere at the table. Before disappearing again, Claire watched me pick up my fork. Then she asked, quietly, what happens now? I took a slow, deliberate bite, chewed, set the fork down. Nothing, I said. Not anymore. Something shifted in her expression then. Not love, exactly, but something adjacent to fear. The fear of losing something you have been taking for granted. She said she didn't want to lose me, that she didn't want it to end like this. You don't want to lose me, I repeated. But you stopped wanting me years ago. Those aren't the same thing, Claire. Not even close. She didn't answer, and I realized, sitting there with cold pancakes and a mug of bad coffee between us, that she had never been fighting for the marriage. She had been fighting for the comfort of it, the stability, the familiar shape of a life she didn't have to rebuild. And I was done being the foundation of something that had never been built. For me, I reached into my jacket and set 2 bills on the counter. Then I stood up. She started to say my name. I shook my head, just once, and walked out. The sun was well up by then, burning off the marine layer, the kind of California morning that is genuinely beautiful, in a way that feels almost cruel when you are in pain. I stood in the parking lot before getting in the car, caught my reflection in the driver's side window. Tired, unshaved, wearing yesterday's clothes. I barely recognized the man looking back. And I realized, with a clarity that surprised me, that this unfamiliarity wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe the man who had built his entire identity around making someone else comfortable needed to stop existing. Maybe there was someone different underneath, who had been waiting a long time to find out what he wanted. I heard footsteps behind me. Of course she had followed. She said I couldn't just leave, that we had a house, a life, things to figure out. We do, I agreed, turning around. But not today. Not like this. Not until I figure out who I am. When I'm not busy being someone's safe option. She stared at me. I think she had expected me to break, to soften, to give her the opening she needed, to steer things back to familiar territory. But I was done negotiating for a place in someone's life. I got in the car. I did not check the rearview mirror. I drove north. No destination, just movement. The 101 opening up ahead of me, mile markers ticking past, the landscape shifting from city to suburb, to something more open and less defined. Somewhere past Ventura, I pulled into a gas station that felt frozen in another decade, and stood beside the pump, stretching my back, staring at nothing in particular. An older man inside noticed me, weathered face, unhurried, noticed me looking like what I was, and said, without preamble, "You've been driving a long time." I told him I was trying to figure out where I was supposed to be. He nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense. And he said, "Thing about not knowing where you're going is that sometimes that's where the good stuff is." It was a small thing, but it landed. I sat in the car and scrolled through my phone, past Claire's messages, past work emails, past a group chat that was mostly our shared friends, who would find out eventually, in whatever version she chose to tell them. And then I stopped on a name I hadn't thought to call in a long time. Marcus, my older brother, living up in Sacramento with his wife and 2 kids. We'd drifted, not because anything had happened between us, but because life had filled the space where closeness used to be, and I had let it, because I had been too busy tending to a marriage that apparently didn't need me. I called him. He answered on the second ring, groggy at first, then alert, the way people who love you learn to be. He asked if I was okay. "No," I said, "but I think I'm ready to figure out what okay looks like." He didn't pepper me with questions. He just listened, while I told him enough. Not everything, not yet, but enough. And when I finished, he said, "Come up here. Take the spare room. No pressure, no timeline. Just come." I said yes before I had even fully decided to. The drive to Sacramento took most of the afternoon. My phone rang twice, Claire, and I let it ring both times. By the time I pulled onto Marcus's street, the sun was going down, turning the sky that deep, complicated orange that shows up on the best days, and the hardest ones alike. He was on the front porch when I got there, hands in his jacket pockets, watching me pull up, like he had been expecting me for a while. When I climbed out of the car, he looked me over for a long moment, took in the exhaustion written all over my face, and then he just said, "Good to see you, man," and handed me a beer. Something in my chest loosened at those words. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't expect me to perform fineness for his comfort. He just knew. We sat out on the porch as it got dark. Crickets in the distance. The sound of his kids inside. A silence between us that didn't need to be filled. After a while, he asked, "Do you regret it?" I sat with that question. really sat with it. Did I regret walking away from the life I had built? From the woman I had loved? No. What I regretted was the years before, the signs I had seen and reclassified, the distances I had explained away, the thousand small moments where honesty would have been better than hope. I regretted how long I had stayed devoted to someone who had already quietly left. I regret not seeing it sooner, I said finally. But leaving? No. I think it's the first honest thing I've done for myself in years. Marcus nodded and didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how the house would look on paper, or how our shared friends would divide along invisible fault lines, or how long it would take before I stopped reaching for my phone to share something with a woman who had never really been mine, the way I thought she was. I just had a spare bedroom, and a brother who showed up, and a beer going warm in my hand, and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of not having to perform okayness for someone else's comfort. For the first time in 10 years, the future wasn't a promise I was managing for someone else. It was just open, and I was going to find out, at whatever pace I needed, exactly who I was inside of it.